week 3. This week we're going to focus on the cultural and global aspects of cultural and social entrepreneurship. Cultural entrepreneurship is obviously culturally situated and framed. Cultural entrepreneurship. But social entrepreneurship is also culturally situated and framed. Any social entrepreneurial project is engaged within an area, a community, a culture. Any project has to attend to the cultural and often global dynamics at play. Honestly, we could spend 7 weeks just talking about cultural and global dynamics in cultural and social entrepreneurship. So we're really going to skip across these issues fairly quickly this week. Before I talk specifically about our week 3 readings, cases, and sparks, and about your project 3 work, I want to talk a little bit more about culture. Recently, Sweden became the first country to adopt a typeface, or a font. Most countries, as a national public radio story about Sweden noted, have a national flag, a national anthem, a national bird, sometimes a national flower. These things help anchor a country's unique identity. But more and more countries have turned toward the business practice of branding and using it to culturally brand their unique aspects and elements. This is a really interesting example of a business practice being put to work in terms of cultural entrepreneurship. In this context, the entire culture or country is the entrepreneurial initiative. Most countries want to attract businesses, artists, and national recognition. Sweden has adopted a particularly smart strategy for anchoring its world identity. Along with this specific font face, Sweden has also adopted a color scheme. And this color scheme and typography is for use on their websites, national press releases, tourism brochures, and more. And if Sweden succeeds, when people see these two colors together or they see this font face, people will immediately think Sweden. They will have culturally anchored their brand. In their introduction to Harnessing Place Branding Through Cultural Entrepreneurship, the book's editors tell the story of 17th century militiamen in Amsterdam. The militiamen were responsible for maintaining law and commissioned Rembrandt to paint a collective portrait of them in 1642, when their job was primarily ceremonial at that. And this was pretty typical at the time. Paintings served to anchor identity, to represent figures like leaders, to represent important cultural things like a militia. Rembrandt painted the Night Watch, which the Netherlands adopted as a symbol for their nation in one of the first moves of cultural branding. About 400 years later, in 2014, U.S. President Barack Obama called for an emergency meeting of the Group of 7 industrial nations. World leaders gathered in the Netherlands. Obama stood in the museum where the Night Watch is held, and while standing in front of the painting, referred to it as easily the most impressive backdrop I've ever had for a press conference. The authors of Harnessing Place Branding Through Cultural Entrepreneurship anchored this as an example of a powerful interaction between the life of a masterpiece by a world-renowned cultural entrepreneur and media practice within the contemporary brand reputation culture. The authors define place branding as a way to give cultural entrepreneurs incentive for the development of active engagement in collective social and economic life. And the authors continue, and they argue that although companies are really good at branding, arts and cultural industries generally aren't. The chapters in the book provide arguments for how local communities and economies can be revitalized through place branding and cultural entrepreneurship. Communities and cities can embrace cultural industries to anchor their identity. And a great example of this is Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is world known for its renowned international art prize competition. Grand Rapids has leveraged Art Prize to anchor its cultural identity. Art Prize is, as the organizers describe it, a radically open, independently organized international art competition. For 19 days every fall, 3 square miles of downtown Grand Rapids, Michigan become an open playing field where anyone can find a voice in the conversation about what art is and why art matters. The public vote grand prize winner and the artwork that tied for the jurors grand prize in 2014 was Anila Kwanyam Agha's piece called Intersection, which was displayed as an installation inside the Grand Rapids Art Museum. And you're seeing the piece on the screen now. Agha described her goals with the projects as inviting viewers to confront the contradictory nature of all intersections and all boundaries. She invites us to consider the binaries of public and private, light and shadow, and static and dynamic. She also talked about the piece being influenced by exclusion, specifically as a woman, by her not having access to the space of community and creativity of the mosque. Art Prize 8 will be held this fall in Grand Rapids. It serves to anchor the city as a cultural capital, and it brings together millions of people around public art. It's a great example of a city and a community engaged in cultural entrepreneurship. Again, the focus of the week 3 readings, cases, and sparks is on the cultural and global context of social and cultural entrepreneurship. So first we're going to read a short piece by Patricia Gonzalez where she argues for the value that culture adds to entrepreneurship. She connects some important dots between culture and social entrepreneurship. The next 2 readings push at the contextual nature of social or cultural entrepreneurship. Reading 2 is by Muhammad Yunus, who is seen as the leader in microfinancing and an icon in social entrepreneurship. The second reading is a piece by an entrepreneur named Nancy Roof, and she talks specifically and in really rich ways about a global and integrated perspective. All of the cases for week 3 are actually examples of the type of work you're going to produce for project 3. That is, they're all profile pieces of individuals involved in social or cultural entrepreneurship. We'll read a profile of Tom's shoes, specifically about Blake Mykoski. You read and saw a bit about Tom's last week. We'll read a profile of Muhammad Yunus, who is the author of one of the readings we're doing for this week. You'll read a profile of a woman from Michigan doing cultural work, and a profile of David Bishop, who runs a social entrepreneurial venture called Soap Cycling. We have 2 sparks for week 3. The first is the list of the 2016 Skoll Social Entrepreneurship Award winners. Read the overview text and take a look at the profiles of some of the winners. The second spark is related to the New Economy Initiative in Detroit. The cases for this week are all good examples of what you're going to produce for Project 3. For Project 3, you're going to do some profiling and representing. You're going to identify an individual, a social or cultural entrepreneur that you think is interesting. Research and find out more about them, their background, the work they do, how they're changing the world, and you're going to write a short profile piece. If you know someone who does social or cultural entrepreneurship work, you might want to interview them and write an interview-based profile piece. If you want to focus on someone who maybe isn't accessible to you, someone like Blake Mykoski, then what you can do is read their Twitter feed, look at their Facebook, read more about what they've done, read some of the articles they've written, and write a research-based profile piece. The full assignment for Project 3 and some really helpful models and examples are saved in the week 3 folder on D2L. So that's our focus and our work for week 3 and project 3. As usual, don't be shy. Email me if you have any questions or concerns as you explore the materials and get started on project 3. Happy creating.